Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners.
I would just tell anybody that's looking to scale a land business, it can be very cash intensive if number one, you're funding your own deals, which is very tempting because it's an inventory-based business at some level, right? Like you're purchasing a property and now your cash is in that asset until you can sell it.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yes, I'm your host, Billy Keels, and I'm super excited to welcome you back to another episode, another conversation full of value. This guy even breaks down some super awesome steps. So you're really going to enjoy it. So, but before we do that, once again, thanks so much for continuing to tag us across LinkedIn, across Instagram, across social media channels. And also for those of you who continue to leave your honest written reviews as well as ratings, we really appreciate those. So continue to do that. Helps to bring more people to the Go Along family. We really appreciate that because we're adding value. And also for those of you who want to check out some previous episodes, like today's episode, you may want to watch a couple of different times. Watch, I said, or listen to. Just go to firstncp.com/podcast. You can find every single episode there that you ever would want to listen to, watch, and even find the transcript. So aside from that, we're going to talk today about a topic that we've maybe talked a couple of times, not a whole lot, but this is one of those things, especially for anyone who wants to add some assets to your portfolio. You want to be able to do that from the convenience of your home. I know you're going to get a lot out of this. You've got people that are high-paid professionals. People are just getting started. We're going to touch on the topic of land. And we're going to do that with today's guest, Mr. Ajay Sharma. And we're going to get to the conversation with Ajay Sharma. We're going to get to that in just after this. So if you want to understand how financial understanding combined with vacant land can unlock the potential in your long-distance investing journey, then guess what? Today's the conversation you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. I did say very last word. You know why? Because today's guest, not only, we're going to take him back a while, but this guy has overseas experience that he did during his undergraduate. And that speaks a lot to me because I'm a guy from Ohio who's been living overseas myself for many years. He also has professional experiences in both the logistics arena as well as finance arena. And he's going to tell us more about that. And today, you know what? He brings this skill set both into IT as well as real estate. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, the co-owner of Assets for Acres, Mr. Ajay Sharma. Ajay, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much, Billy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to it. And I know you're doing some other stuff and you can let everybody know about that kind of stuff, but I just kind of wanted to, bring up a little bit of a few of the highlights. And before I do that, I think you know that I like to ask everybody 2 questions in the beginning and 3 questions in the end for a total of 5 questions. Although those are the questions that I know about. I'm also going to ask you some other questions. But the thing is, would you like to start with question number 1?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So help us understand, man, where is it that you call home in the U.S. today?
Yeah, so I now am proud to say that I call the Lone Star State home. So Texas, land of the free, baby. I am pumped to be here. I spent many years in Chicago where it is cold and there is unfortunately a lot of illicit activity. And so it is awesome to be down in Texas with warm weather, lots of land, good fun, freedom, all the things. So I'm about 40 minutes north of Dallas, Texas, in a city called Frisco.
All right, fantastic. So in Frisco. And, question number 2, because Ajay, I really am a big fan of positivity. So help us understand, what's the most positive thing that's happened to or for you in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here and jinx myself, but it's been a really funny past 36 hours. I've got a property owner that lives 51 minutes away from my house. And so me and my business partner, Ben, actually drove out to him Sunday night. And I think based on our conversation last night, we should be getting a signed contract on over 60 acres that we're going to be platting and entitling for a single family residence development. So one of the first times we're taking down one of those projects. Overall, really exciting. I'll share a slight personal one too. Picked my fiance up from the airport yesterday. So that's always fun when she's back in town.
Oh man, fantastic. It was great to be able to, on both the personal side of things, being able to pick up your fiance and also having some forward progress in a potential deal. We appreciate you sharing that with us. And listen, Ajay, I'm going to let you in on a little secret that the entire Going Long family already knows, but I know you and I are just meeting, so you wouldn't have known this in advance, that I'm a recovering perfectionist, which means that sometimes I try to do things that are a little bit maybe outside of the realm of possibility, like tell your entire backstory. I think it took me about a second and a half. You've done way too much. You've helped too many people and you're doing big things. And so, you know what? Apologies for trying to do that because it was never going to happen. So I'm going to ask you for your help because I want you to tell your backstory in your own words. And you can take a whole lot longer than 1.5 seconds because you're our guest today. I'm just going to ask you for one other favor though. When you're telling your backstory, could you also talk to us about some of the major decisions that you made to get to this point in your journey? And then we'll see where you and I take the conversation from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Over to you.
Like so many others that got started in real estate, I started listening to the podcasts. Bigger Pockets was the big one, pretty common one. I feel like most folks have heard them before. And that was actually back in college. So for those that don't know, I'm 25 right now, going on 26. I'm a young buck in the whole real estate arena, especially in the land arena. So my journey started in college, listening to the podcasts, and I was a classic entrepreneur, is what I like to say. I was listening to them, listening to the books. I was getting my dopamine hits, Billy, but I wasn't doing anything about it, right? And so fast forward, I graduated and finally gotten a job. That was it, man. I was in big corporate. I was making good money. I was in IT consulting. Great work-life balance, great people, all the things, right? But I'm somebody that can't sit on my hands. And it was during this era where there was this like small virus going around, this little pandemic thing that was happening across the world. So we had remote work. And the cool thing about remote work is people don't know when you're working and when you're not. And so I was working 20 to 30 hours a week and they thought I was working 50 because I'm good at what I do, right? And so I can't sit on my hands very long, Billy, and there's only so much more work I could ask for. And so when push came to shove, I was like, all right, let's get into real estate. Now's the time, right? I started assessing my options. And the way I chose land versus other asset classes was primarily based on two variables. Number one was perception of risk, right? So with most asset classes, there's some level of borrowing of other people's capital that you need, right? And I could not with confidence go borrow other people's capital just based on textbook and hearsay knowledge. I'm somebody that really likes experience. And as somebody who's also lent out money to other investors, I really value when they have experience. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that deals speak for themselves. That being said, at the time, I wasn't comfortable asking for money, right? And I was 22 years old, man. I had $5,000 in my name. And so I looked at, all the different options. And sure enough, land had the lowest barrier to entry. Okay. So assessed it, found some stuff on YouTube, bought a course. A week later, sent out my first direct mail campaign, pretty common marketing channel for a lot of real estate investors. Hooked a deal, man. Hooked a deal in my first mailer. It was both great and horrible. Great in the sense that I got a deal that I got to buy all in for $3,500. Within 3 weeks, I sold it for $15,000 and I was hooked. The bad is I only had sent out 150 postcards as my marketing campaign. And anybody that's an active real estate investor just knows that's such a small sample size. And I really just got lucky hitting this random rural market in Wisconsin. And so that's what got me started. And, fast forward now, I've got a business partner. His name's Ben. I mentioned him a little earlier. We've got 4 full-time on staff, 3 in the Philippines, 1 in the US, and then I have my own executive assistant as well. So we're pretty staffed with the team. We're scaling the business. We're having fun.
Very cool. So when you're having fun, you're able to scale the business, and at the same time, you are, you're having success along the way. But there's one thing that you kind of said really, really kind of quickly, and I always like to bring things back because people are like, well, hang on a second. So you mentioned when push came to shove that you wanted to figure out which area of real estate that you wanted to go into. And well, it was low barrier to entry, and you decided that you wanted to go into this space which was land. But you also mentioned at the beginning that you're 26, you started 22, 25, 26, I think is what you said. Correct me. I'm a little bit further along, if you will. But one of the things that I'm always really interested in, man, is like, you kind of went to which area in real estate, but I'm always curious, like, because when I was out of college, I didn't even know that this existed. I was just all in on my job. Like I was just going in forever. And I didn't have anybody around me that was talking about real estate. Most people talked about stock market and mutual funds and blah, blah. So before you got to like land, take a step back and help us understand, like, what was it even about the real estate versus any of the other options from an investing standpoint that you could have taken? Like, why did you even, like, what was it that attracted your attention to this real assets or real estate space?
Yeah. So Billy, I'm going to go a little further back and then I'll walk up to how I got to real estate, if that's okay.
Do it. Do it.
So am I allowed to get vulnerable with your audience?
Yeah, I guess I do every once in a while. So yeah, you can go ahead, get vulnerable with this.
For some context, man, when I was 9 years old, my father left my family. So walked out on us, maxed out all my mom's credit cards, sold our house. We were basically homeless. Moved in with an uncle. Bless his heart. Really, glad I grew up in Southern Indiana, down where he was. And because of that, I've always had this chip on my shoulder about control. Okay. Anybody that's listening that grew up poor, had some horrible situation, understands that, especially when you're young, man, the feeling of being helpless and powerless just sucks, right? So I always knew as I got older, I was never going to let that happen to myself, right? And so when college came, it was like, sure, man, I'm going to have an income, but people can stop my paycheck from coming in, right? I make a mistake, I get in late, the economy goes down, whatever, I get fired. And not that I can't go find another job, but I don't believe in letting other people have control of both my time and my income. Now, the time's kind of a bonus, we could dive into. But I've always had a chip on my shoulder about controlling my freedom at some level because I watched what happened modeled for me as a kid of how it looked to feel powerless. And I was a child. So fast forward, you become an adult, you have responsibilities. I'm getting married in a few months. I'd love to start a family not too long after, right? I refused to let that be a reality for my loved ones. And so when it came to, okay, how do we achieve that level of financial control? So not even just independence, but control. I want to live a permissionless life is something my business partner, Ben, and I always say. And so real estate was a natural progression because everybody preaches passive income, which there's only a few ways you can truly get passive income in real estate. Partnering with good operators, syndications, investing in good people. Aside from that, if you're running your own stuff, it's a business, but that's a whole separate conversation. The point being, though, when I hit a certain age where I was assessing, I want to live a permissionless life where I control my time, I control my income, I leave a legacy for my family. Real estate, which preached, hey, you've got passive income, you own the asset forever, was very appealing. And so that's what brought me in. And here's a piece of the story that I left out, Billy, is my original intention with land was, I'm going to flip a couple properties. And every time I make, $50,000 or whatever, I'm going to go put it in a house. Well, man, little did I know, business is so addicting. And so, we started flipping these properties and the cash starts coming in. And I did actually buy one rental property pretty quickly. I'd done one deal where I made just north of $300,000. And that's a lot of money for a 23-year-old. And so I was like, man, I don't even know how I would deploy this much in land. And for anybody that doesn't know, like in Texas, there's 171 million acres of land. You have no problem deploying $300K if you need to into a land project. That being said, I did not understand that at the time because I was just green, right? And so I did buy a rental property. Fast forward, I've since sold it because I'm all about singular focus. And so that was a lot of kind of my train of thought. I've still got this chip on my shoulder. But man, I'm pretty confident that I've built good skills, built good network, and I understand business at a certain level that I'm pumped, man. I love life.
So the fact that you are able to reflect on something that happened to you when you were 9 years old, you think about, family members that were able to step in, support, and also as a result of that, you still kind of kept this chip on your shoulder. And when you think about wanting to have more control, number one, and then also as you talked about this permissionless life, and a lot of that was based on what you had seen or heard from others that were involved in real estate. It wasn't that you had a family member that was involved in real estate. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct.
Okay, cool. So I appreciate that. And because what that does, it just helps us, like, because there's guys like you and me, and ladies like you and I that are like, hey, look, we don't have access directly to people that were in real estate. They can't share the stories directly, but that doesn't keep us from being able to achieve and impact others positively in that space, right? It's just a matter of you find your singular focus, as you talked about, and you continue to drive down that arena. You've tried some other things. We talked about, you purchased a property, you sold it, you did some flipping, wholesaling, and stuff like that. That's just from background information. But yeah, I mean, you are finding your singular focus. So what I'd love to kind of dive into from there is talk to us about because these are, you mentioned these are the early days, and you wanted to be able to, in the early days, you wanted to be able to get more wins and more things that were moving forward. At the same time, there's always things that don't work, right?
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the pros and the cons of the land business, right? And I want you to keep it from a perspective that we have a lot of people here that are, they're high paid professionals. They're bringing, they're accredited investors, and they are, they really like their jobs. At the same time, they're listening. They're like, hey man, you know what? Ajay's talking about something, man. He helped me understand that land is really, really cool, but he also was real with me and said, hey, he was vulnerable. He said, there's some things you want to at least pay attention to. Talk to us about those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll tell you just high level in terms of like my personal failures. I did not plan well when anybody that's been paying attention to real estate and honestly in global economics, the Fed hiking interest rates. Okay. And so I had done that larger deal. I had a good lump sum. I got to write the IRS my first 6-figure check. That was a ton of fun.
As he and I are both looking at, you should be checking out the video version. Anyone, if you're not, go over to YouTube, check us out, hang out, watch what Ajay just did, the face that he just put on there, because it's not fun writing a 6-figure check to Uncle Sam. Never is.
Anyway. Never is. And so in land, there's different types of properties you can be working with. The two most common ones that we'll work with are what I would call an infill lot. So that's like your 1/4 acre to 1 acre lot that's in a platted subdivision that's just bare. It's pretty much shovel ready. Like a builder could come in, start building tomorrow if they needed to. That's kind of how I started my career in the small flip game. I would buy these lots for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, sell for 15 to 30 all day long. Great flips. I was doing, 1 to 3 a month fairly consistently. Now, when the Fed began to start hiking interest rates, there was a lot of fear in the marketplace. And so I had several of these properties that I was actually wholesaling to builders as well. And they all just stopped at once. And I probably had 20 different builders I had worked with. And no joke, they'd all just stopped. They said, no, we're just unsure of what's going to happen. And so for the next 45 days, we're not buying anything. I was like, okay, well, I only have X amount of time left on my contract. I've got cash flow. I've got overhead, right? Yep. And so I had a couple $100,000 in land that I owned, and stuff just stopped moving for a little bit. And so like in personal failures, I would just tell anybody that's looking to scale a land business, it can be very cash intensive if number one, you're funding your own deals, which is very tempting because it's an inventory based business at some level, right? Like you're purchasing a property and now your cash is in that asset until you can sell it. So just real quick, an advantage of us buying properties as investors is land is typically the least liquid of all asset classes in real estate. There are much smaller liquidity pools based on your buyer pool. And so because of that, we get to provide quick cash, which essentially allows us to buy properties at a discount very, very regularly, right? Yep. That being said, you can get stuck holding the bag, right? And so I had a 6-month period where like Billy, cash was tight, man. Cash was really tight. You had to keep marketing. And so, I would encourage everybody to just get really, really good at understanding cash flow if you're going to dive into the business. And don't get me wrong, you can run a really modest solopreneur type business and, not spend more than $60,000 a year on marketing. That's not all at once, right? That's throughout the year and make a good 6-figure living, just doing that. But you start hiring employees, you start doing some expensive marketing, you start testing new channels. Very, very quickly, you can, again, get stuck holding the bag, have to discount your properties, and, do what it takes to survive. So anyways, that's a personal failure. And what I would just caution some folks as they're looking to get in is it's more of a cash flow game than a lot of people realize. There was a second question you asked me. I'm sorry. I blabbered a bit.
Well, no, just talk to us about some of where you see the upsides and also some of the potential risks, right? Just to keep it real, like, because most people are like, hey, this is the most amazing thing. And you started with the vulnerable side of things. And so just, what do you see as some of the upside or the pros for that person who's a busy working professional and just like, hey, look, Ajay's talking to us about this.
Yeah. So on the upside, it is probably still one of the least competitive of all the real estate niches. Now, I can't personally attest to that in the sense that I've worked in all of them, but I can tell you from all my friends that are house wholesaling, doing apartments, doing commercial, And it's a different game. Like you're competing with guys like me. Not that I'm an idiot, but I'm not a big guy and my ROI requirements are pretty high. Like typically if I'm purchasing a deal, I want to double my money. If I have a $100,000 property, I'd like to purchase it for 50 grand. There are other folks out there that have lower ROI requirements and are willing to pay more because of it. Well, you don't see that as often in land because it's less bankable, it's not as liquid. And so there's a certain perception of risk from like the financial institutions because of that until you start getting into like super large tracts, like 7-figure plus tracts of land. And then, well above that, commercial properties, that type of thing. That being said, because it's not competitive, I think anybody who gets in with, the right guidelines, it's two things like when you're doing anything. It's number one, frequency. Right? It's just a numbers game. It's math. You got to like do the things. And then number two, it's what activities are you doing and are you doing them like the right-ish way? There's no like right or wrong. And I know, Billy, I know you said you were a recovering perfectionist, so maybe there is a right or wrong way in your head, but that being said,
we struggle with it a lot, but then afterwards, I think you're going to tell us the reality, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. What I can tell you is at the core, and I try to give out like tactical goods every time I'm talking to folks. If you track these 5 things, I promise you do deals under the assumption your due diligence and your comping is correct. Okay. And it's gross leads. How many leads are you getting in the door based on your marketing, right? Your direct mail, cold calls, cold texts, ringless voicemails, PPC, PPL, whatever you're doing. It's gross leads.
Right. So for people that don't know PPC and PPL, what does that mean for them?
Pay per click. So like on Google, right? And then PPL would be pay per lead.
Thank you.
Like motivated leads would be a vendor that does pay per lead. So thank you for that, Billy.
Yeah, no problem. On to number two.
I love it. So you've got, number 2 is then net leads. So how many of those leads did you actually talk to? I can't tell you how many people like get an initial phone call and they say something funky in the voicemail. And so you're like, oh, I'm too scared to call them now. Well, dude, you're leaving money on the table, right? Have a normal conversation, just be a human, right? Yep. But net leads, how many of those are you talking to? Number 3 then is of those you talk to, how many do you make an offer on the property? Right. So there's this good expression in sales that if you don't ask, the answer is already no. So you might as well ask, right? It's the same thing in real estate, right? So, he wants 100 grand, but I can only give him, 85. Tell him that, dude, because if you don't, you're not getting it for 85. I'll tell you that right now. Right. So how many offers are you actually making? People chicken out. Don't let the seller tell you the asking price. And obviously it's their say at the end of the day, but make the offer, right? After that, it's verbal acceptances. Maybe there's an issue and you're just a horrible salesman. We need to work on your closing, right? So track that ratio. And then the last one is contracts signed. So we actually get a lot of gaps in like a flip type business with verbal acceptances to people who actually sign a contract. And there's good sales process in between you can do of setting good expectations. An expression I get from one of my mentors, Jenny Hudspeth, she says, fear breeds uncertainty. And uncertainty drives inaction, right? So if people don't know something, I might have gotten that backwards. Uncertainty drives fear, fear drives inaction. Sorry, apologies. Strike the original. But think about it. If people don't understand something, they're going to get scared. And if they're scared, they're not going to do anything, right? How many times do you like tell somebody yes or think about it, and then you just kind of avoid it and don't do it altogether? All the time. Right. Especially in this world where everybody's asking for your attention. So anyways, those are the 5 key metrics. Those are some things I would look out for. If you send out marketing, do those 5 things with good underlying principles of comping and due diligence. Well, you will do deals.
The probability of doing deals following the 5 steps that Ajay just laid out for you is much higher than if you do nothing and you're just listening. I think at the end of the day is the point that he's making. So he's just laid out 5 really simple steps, 5 things that you can take a lead of from the gross lead all the way to the signed contracts. And it makes sense. Take that from someone who spent 26 years in the sales and sales leadership roles, doing that across many geographies. I don't think he can make it any simpler for you. So appreciate that, Ajay. One of the things that before we get into the go along final 3, because you mentioned it before, right? As you get started, you think about, you want to be able to scale. You go from having 0 people on your team to, you, a business partner, as well as 4 other people that are working with you. Some of them are in different geographies. Well, everybody's in a different geography from my understanding. I don't think anybody's there with you in Frisco. So talk to us a little bit about what that is. It's not necessarily for everybody that's going to build a team, right? Some people just want to get started, but what's that been like going through building a team and making sure that you have the right team for you right now?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question, Billy. I could talk about this for another hour and a half, so I'll try to keep it short.
Well, I was going to say, you can't, man. Not today. At least not here.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man.
I'm kidding.
So first, at a high level, something that I've learned that I think is incredible about building teams is that culture actually starts to matter. And guys, like, it's one of these mushy things, right? Like when you're starting a business and you hire your first employee, you're not really paying attention to culture. By the time you've got employees like 3, 4, 5, you start to really be like, oh, I don't like that behavior, or I do really like that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to know which ones to reinforce and which ones to not. An expression I say to a lot of my coaching clients is, hey, if you don't create a culture will be created. It's just not going to be yours, right?
Yep.
So you got to be really intentional on that stuff. That being said, I think something from the book Traction by Gino Wickman, he says you hire and fire based off core values. So I'd encourage anybody who either already has a business or is looking to start one, boil down 3 to 5 principles that you really like live and die by. For us, it's really simple. We keep it 3. Enthusiasm. I want you to be excited to be here. If you're not, please leave. Simple as that, right? Dependability. I need you to know you can count on me, and that's a two-way street. I need to be able to count on you to do your job. And as long as you communicate effectively in situations where you might not be able to, we're going to be A-okay, right? Number 3 is growth. That's kind of all encompassing. Number 1, we as employers want to make sure you have potential or a potential to grow into whatever position you'd like, into your fullest potential. And if that means leaving the organization, I'd like to help you get there, right? And on the internal side, how can we foster growth and innovation, and for our staff to bring forward ideas, and for people to be invited into doing that, and for them to learn new skills and be excited about that and have good mentors, et cetera, et cetera. So we invest a lot into coaching and masterminds and all the things. Now, most particularly when it comes to hiring overseas versus US, right? I pay a lot of attention to the role. If it's something that's really manual and repetitive, a lot of times you can go overseas pretty easily. I'm very blessed with very, very smart virtual assistants over in the Philippines. We've got 3 over there, and I mean, they're brilliant. They're really, really good at their jobs. They're incredibly smart, and their jobs can be kind of repetitive, and they're great at showing up every single day and innovating, even in those tasks is awesome. What I would say is typically if I have people like closing deals, I really like them being US based. There's a level of rapport you can build talking about football. There's certain words you wouldn't quite understand. I'll give an example is we had a Latin American VA who she was closing for a little bit for us. Unfortunately, we had to let her go, but she was taking this call with the seller. And the question was, hey, why are you interested in selling your property? And he was like, well, I'm getting older, so I'm planning out my estate. Which to anybody who's a native English speaker, you're like, oh, he's dying, right? He's planning his death.
Yeah.
She responded, that's great.
Right.
So it's just a clear example of, hey, if English isn't your first language, there could be a gap in communication. And I'm a big fan of communicating with the intent to not be misunderstood, rather than just trying to communicate to be understood. So all that being said, there's some quick things I would think through when hiring domestic versus overseas. There's some hiring and firing principles. I'm trying to keep this brief, Billy.
Yeah. No worries. When you were saying football, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, which football? Because I've been living in Europe for the last 22 years, and I'm thinking, are you talking about soccer? Or are you talking about football?
Bundesliga.
And so, yeah, there you go. La Liga.
Yeah.
No, but this is, I mean, once again, you've helped us just kind of on some frameworks, right? In the way that you think about, depending on, because not everybody wants to grow a team, but if you are thinking about growing a team, think about, how do you set up that culture? And as you talk to us about, for you, it's enthusiasm, it's dependability, and it's also about growth. And how do you instill those? For you, it works for 3. For some people, they may need 5, or whatever the case may be. And then you think about each specific role, the experience that you want to have for your end prospect or client, and then making sure that you have the right skill set, the right talent to be able to grow into for those particular roles. So that makes a lot of sense. And here's the thing, Ajay, I want to keep talking to you forever, man. I mean, I was going to give you like an hour and a half to answer that one question, but the reality is we got to get to the going long final 3. And the thing is, you're our special guest today, so I'll never ask you to go long final 3 unless you tell me you're ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
I think you were born ready. So that was really going to be an easy one. So here we go. So question number 3, but it's the first of the going long final 3. I am a guy from in the Midwest, very similar to you. I kind of left the Midwest. I've been in the Mediterranean for the last 22 plus years. And so I always want to know, right? You're over in Frisco nowadays, but talk to us about what is your favorite European city that you've either visited, Ajay, or is still on your bucket list to visit?
Yeah, so I've not done a lot of Europe yet, unfortunately. I'm hoping to do some on the honeymoon here in a few months. But to date, the favorite city I've been to is London. I'm kind of a sucker for a good city, man. And the tube system is brilliant compared to, I lived in Chicago for years. The L is, it works.
Yeah, but that's a tube versus a subway. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I mean,
kidding.
Truly, the tube is brilliant. Transportation's amazing. And London's filled with really good food, and like the international arena, especially. So if you like food, man, there's really, really good food in London. Tons of culture, tons of history. So I've enjoyed my time. I've been to London twice, and I really, really liked it.
All right, so we'll take that. So London. So question number 2, the going along final 3. This really has a lot to do with, and you shared, I mean, you were vulnerable with this earlier. You talked about some of the things that have worked, some of the things that haven't worked. Now, I don't really want you to think about what did not work. But what I found is that the people that are the most successful, meaning that they're moving consistently towards their goals, are the ones that when they have a setback, mistake, learning opportunity, call it whatever you want to call it, like things didn't work out the way that they were supposed to, they stop and they always take stock in what happened. And then after that, they put different strategies, tactics, and principles in place so that the exact same thing doesn't happen again. So I don't want you to think about the mistake, but what's the lesson that you learned when that thing occurred? Because I'd love for you to share that one very simple lesson with the Going Long family today. What would that one lesson be?
Yep. So it would be in our company culture. I know you said you don't want to hear the mistake. When we had to let go of a staff member, a question that our mentor asked us, very similar to this, was where did we grow and what did we learn? Right? There is no failure. Those are the 2 questions you ask after something happens. And what we took away at our core was there's just no room for complaining or mediocrity here, and it sounds brutal, but number 1, don't complain. I'm okay if you need to vent about something, if something's fresh, it's on your heart, whatever. You dwell on it. You always have something, one bad apple, right? No room for negativity here. You seem like somebody who's very, very into the positive energies. We feed into that. Let's help each other, right? Because if I sat here and complained for an hour, you'd leave feeling like crap. You know what I mean? And so no room for complaining, no room for mediocrity, right? We're filled with excellent people and we all want to help each other get better.
Yeah, very cool. So creating that culture once again, being able to focus on the positive and being able to continue to lift people up. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Question number 3, and it's the last of the Going Long final 3. And this is about really filling our brains. So help us, Ajay, to understand, what is one book that you would recommend to the Going Long family today?
Man, one of my favorite books it's a classic, Go Giver. You read that one?
Yeah, Bob Burg.
Yes, exactly. It's very short. And I'm a big audiobook guy. I think I did the whole book in about 2 hours. I love anecdotal books, and it's told through story, which is awesome.
Yep.
And I mean, it's just like the leading principle in business. You lead with value and it'll come back. Like the marketplace tells you when you're creating value in a marketplace. And that's truly what capitalism is at a core level. Now there's pros and cons. I don't want to get into that stuff, but truthfully, right, there's this trade going on. And if we can provide more value than we take, we're always going to make money. Money is just a consequence. It's a currency. Right? It's the means of trade. So lead with value and it'll come back tenfold. And Go Giver is a phenomenal way to explain that whole process. Great book.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great one. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And, every single time I finish a conversation, I'm just like, I cannot believe how fast these conversations just go, they're already done, right? I'm thinking about you telling us about, you're getting started, you're done after college, you're decided you wanted to get into something, you start going to bigger pockets, and from bigger pockets, you realize hey, listen, you kind of went directly to the land stuff, but you took a step back and helped us understand what happened in your life at 9 years old, and family members that intervene, and also you being able to say, hey, you know what? I really want some more control over my life, the outcomes of my life. And I want to be able to get to a point in my life where, it's a permissionless life. I don't need to ask anybody for anything. I can do the things that I want to do based on the work and the value that I've created for others. And so as you've continued to do that, I mean, you even talked to us about how you have physically moved from one geography to another, being able to be in an area, growing a team, being able to make a positive impact, and having a singular focus, which is in the area of land that we talked about before. And so I know that I'm talking and I'm going on and people are just like, yeah, Billy, just ask him the question. So let me get to the point here. Help us understand, Ajay, how can we find out more about you, find out more about what it is that you're doing, and get connected?
Yep. So number one, I'm pretty active on Instagram. Haven't gotten on the rest of the socials yet, but pretty active on Instagram. Handle is at investing with Ajay. Ajay is spelled AJAY. And then you can just email me too. I'm pretty responsive via email. It's ajay@learn.land. That's the coaching business I'm a partner in.
All right, perfect. Ajay at learn.land. You can check him out on his handle on Instagram, and don't worry, everybody, it'll be here in the notes as well, or in the show notes. So, Ajay, listen, man, I just want to say on behalf of the entire Going Long family, really appreciate you deciding to invest your time with me, with us, and thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Billy.
All right, cool. Give me like 15 seconds. I'll wrap things up and get you out of here. So, Going Long family, listen, he broke down 5 simple steps for you to follow. He talked to you about the way that they build their 3 company values. He even talked to you about why he got into land and what are some of the pros, some of the things you need to think about. Take this episode, listen to it a couple times, share it with family and friends, go from theory to practice. Heck, even reach out to him. He's made it really simple. You can find him on social media. He's given you his email address. So while you're taking action, because that's the important thing, I'll be here preparing for the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much.